Any given September, the stone industry meets in Verona, Italy for Marmomac, the world's largest trade event for the marble and stone supply chain. From quarries to processed products, technologies and machinery to tools and more, Marmomac 2024 is set to be another great success, with 1,507 exhibitors, 12 halls and 7 outdoor areas, 76,000 square meters of floor space, and 51,000 visitors, with 66% of those being international visitors from 54 countries. Visit www.marmomac.com to learn more about Marmomac. See you in Verona, Italy from September 24th to 27th, 2024. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media editor Warren Frey, and again, I have with me.
Hello, everyone. This is Vince Versace, Director of News Media North America for ConstructConnect. For our longtime listeners and readers of the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce, you'll remember me as a staff writer at the DCN and also as editor and national editor of the DCN-JOC. And of course, one of the early co-hosts here with my friend Warren on our award-winning The Construction Record Podcast.
And the last one we were on together, we delved into pretty recent history, although 23 years seems like yesterday to us, probably not to say a millennial, but we're going even further back this time because we're going to look at the history of the hard hat, which is, I would argue, the most iconic symbol of what construction is, even though it's not that old and construction is very old, comparatively speaking.
Well, exactly. And the roots of the hard hat and why it was created is interesting enough. The creator of the hard hat is enshrined in the National Inventors Hall of Fame in the United States. The third week of September is known as National Construction Week in the U.S. I mean, so we thought, why not actually talk about the most iconic symbol of construction and give readers maybe a bit of history about how it came about, why it was built, how it was built. You know, we take it for granted, like we do with a lot of safety things and everyday items in our life. Like, how was that put together? How was that made and why? And the hard hat is, as you say, you see it anywhere on a shelf.
You know exactly what the deal is.
You know what the deal is, right?
Also,
you know
I remember we were doing, I think it was for Canada 150, we were doing historical, going back in the archives and checking out old projects. And I came across a couple of Vancouver ones, although I'm sure it's the same everywhere. And this is pre-hard hat, pre-PPE of any sort. You just had guys up on 16-story buildings with overalls and regular dress shoes and nothing, and just a hat. And I was like, how is this even allowed? But it was just the way you did things back then, which is why you need a hard hat in the first place.
Well, the roots of it, you know, for that iconic yellow lid, you know, that saves countless lives, is revolutionized safety, not just in construction, revolutionized safety in mining, in other hard industrial areas and projects and jobs.
Firefighting.
The roots of it, firefighting, like it starts in World War I. A gentleman by the name of Edward W. Bullard. He is the inventor and creator of the hard hat. At that point in World War I, he is a lieutenant in the Army, and the Army is outfitted with these metal helmets at the time, right, for protection. The first time that they were kind of used that way. Outside of, I'm sure we probably have listeners talking about, well, back in medieval times, they had metal helmets and faces.
Or ceremonial ones on officers and stuff like that. But those were not as effective. I mean, maybe the knights were, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But this is like actual in warfare. So Bullard comes back from his time in World War I. His father has started a business in California in the San Francisco area called E.D. Bullard & Co. And their focus is particularly in mining and mining equipment and building, they're called selling carbide lamps, the lamps that they would use to go into these mines.
Right.
So Edward comes back with having seen the benefits of the military metal hard hat. Hears the issues of the workers and people working in the mines from falling debris, and takes it upon himself, and with the invention arm of his, the innovation arm of his dad's company, the company he's a part of, to kind of start working on what kind of head protection can they create for these miners, right? So, and here's right out of the entry of Mr. Bullard's bio on the National Inventors Hall of Fame website, and I'll read it verbatim. Bullard soon noticed a common hardship for miners. They had no protection from life-threatening falling debris. Thinking back to the doughboy helmets, those are those military helmets, he and fellow soldiers had worn in France, he was inspired to develop a safety helmet for miners and others engaged in dangerous work. And in 1918, Bullard began turning his idea into reality. And this is kind of neat, how he created it. When you think about what it is now, right, the genesis of it. To create this new helmet, Bullard used overlapping layers of sturdy canvas, which were steamed for temporary pliability, and were secured together with glue. He then covered the inside and outside shell with water-resistant shellac for added strength and durability. Finally, he added leather to the front and rear brims. And here's the key thing. Bullard had created the world's first commercially available industrial protective headgear. He called it the hard-boiled hat, referring to the steam used in its manufacturing process. It was patented and entered into production in 1919. And there it is. Like, I mean, that's the start of it. Like, he sees a problem, as most inventors of a time, especially of an era, I think you and I can talk about, right?
Oh, yeah.
Kind of questionable sometimes about the new, trailblazers and innovators now in the digital space. What are they actually creating that makes a difference, right? Or makes the lot
Somebody
of life.
is, but we won't know until it plays itself out.
Yeah. And here we go. We've seen it play out from that humble beginning, right? So he creates this hat, and it becomes eventually an industry standard. Right, it became common in work zones across the United States, and in particular, the Golden Gate Bridge project, which in 1933 becomes the first hard hat area in the United States of America. You know, and then he had to also redesign that helmet for that project because people on the project were complaining about the falling bridge debris. So in particularly pieces of steel, iron, and rivets falling down and raining down on workers. So he had to develop yet another type of helmet for that, still using the basic premise of his original design. So he was actually able to adapt the helmet. And that's kind of the neat thing. We've seen this now in modern times. It's still being continually adapted. When they talk to family members of the Bullard family, you know, they talk about more lightweight materials, more materials that can last longer, that have their more breathability for people, but still provide the same type of safety, and still achieve that health standard that was set, right? Since the early 70s, the bio goes on to talk actually a little bit. OSHA began requiring workers to wear hard hats on job sites. The number of worker deaths significantly decreased, underscoring the immense importance of Bullard's invention. And it's basically a life-saving legacy. Approximately 6 million hard hats are now sold annually by Bullard & Co. They're in their 5th generation of family ownership as a company, and they continue to produce hard hats and other essential protective gear for workers. In 2019, they celebrated 100 years of head protection, commemorating the invention of the original hard hat.
I mean, we've both got one. I've got one just over here in my closet. So
yes, and that's the thing. It's one of the things you just kind of take for granted, right? But how many stories and safety briefs have we talked about that have shown 2 different outcomes? You know what I mean? Sometimes it's like the head injury itself from the fall or from material falling. And there have been times in your time and my time with the Journal of Commerce and Daily Commercial News where the eventual investigation leads to the fact that maybe the hat wasn't being worn at that time.
Right. Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? Or other times where lives have been saved. We've had people tell us that. Now, there have been, I can still think of certain instances where the hat wasn't enough. You know what I mean? And
that's going to happen. Yeah.
It's going to happen in any field. Right. But to think that it took one gentleman's idea, you know what I mean, of seeing it used in the precursor of it being used in military, for military purposes, to kind of think, hey, I can make the lot of life for my workers, my dad's workers, better back home in mining. And now here we are in construction enjoying that. So,
well, you can see it. He literally sees his buddies saved by these helmets. So it's not much of a leap to figure out, you know, not to downplay what he did, but it isn't much of a mental leap to go, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't just have to be here.
Yeah, no, exactly. So it's pretty cool. We'll include the link to Mr. Bullard's bio in the show notes. And we did a story stemming from 2 Con Expos ago that was kind of an update on hard hat safety and design. We'll include that as well in the show notes for this episode if people want to kind of pick up some new information. And we did run a brief this week, a news brief about Mr. Bullard and the helmet and National Construction Week.
And I know I've talked to scientists and academics about improving the hard hat and in terms of having like, having like a HoloLens on it or something like that. And all this is interesting, but the simplicity of this thing is part of why it works. It's like you don't need the internet in your fridge. Maybe you do need a HoloLens on your hard hat, but I don't know. Like,
it's true. And I think most workers, having a dad that was a carpenter and a master carpenter and built homes, and being someone that likes to build myself, I think about like the simple safety gear I just put on, just out of habit.
And then you forget about it. Yeah.
And I forget about it, but I can think, just like probably a lot of our listeners can think about to that one moment. It's like, you know what, those safety glasses or those work gloves or that helmet saved me, because things go sideways. And when they go sideways on projects and things where you got a lot of moving pieces, they can go fast and it can go bad real fast.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And so you think about that, like, that's just me as a regular home guy, not a do, you know what I mean, not a do-it-yourselfer type guy, but a guy that likes to work. I've had instances where a helmet or gloves or hat or glasses have saved me from a massive injury. So you can imagine on these work sites how many times that happens across our continent, from Canada to the U.S.
And you got to think something like a bike helmet wouldn't be a thing without the hard hat either. And there's probably other examples I can't think of, but there's one that just sprung to me.
Well, the hockey helmet too. You know what I mean? I'm sure at some point,
which it wasn't until the 80s, right? So.
Yeah, but it wasn't required, And as Canadians, we can talk about that. It's like it's amazing when you look back. It's like that looks so unsafe. Besides goalies not wearing football, and now look at the football helmets. You have some players both in the U.S. and here in Canada in the CFL and NFL. Some of them are trying. There's a new football helmet that's been built that I can't remember the name, so I'm not going to say it right now to get it wrong on the air. But it's one that's been designed to help reduce head injuries and concussions. Yeah. It looks funny, quote unquote. It looks different than the current helmet, but you got a couple players that are wearing it.
But so did the baseball helmets when they had to change from regular hats to, which is, I don't know, the 90s and 80s, somewhere in there. And I'm not a sports guy, so don't correct me, people. But it was changed. I do remember that, and it probably same thing, way less injuries.
Yeah, so that's what makes the hard hat, I think, interesting when I compare it to that. Like, I mean, when there have been innovations in the sporting world around helmets and head protection, sometimes it looks pretty extreme what the new thing looks like. It seems like Bullard and I guess the other innovators and creators and manufacturers that came behind them all kind of still stick with the same design. It's still the same thing because it works. Right? It's just the materials that need to be improved. So I hope our listeners learned a little bit about the hard hat, the unique and iconic symbol that keeps the workers that build our countries safe. So with that, Warren, I'm done. Thank you so much. And thanks to the industry as we celebrate National Construction Week. Thank you for everything you do. You know what I mean? Not trying to be trite, but literally we have the pleasure of reporting on the industry that builds the lives that we get to enjoy and live. Well, you know what I mean?
Couldn't put any better than that. Thanks, Vince.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Construction Record Podcast. You can hear us on Apple Music, Amazon, and Spotify, as well as at theconstructionrecord.libsyn.com and on the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce websites. Thanks again for listening.